carnal, dice mi gente, la raza está abajo y tú estás indiferente. Prefieres cerrar los ojos, no vi nada. Estabas ocupado por andar en la tomada. Te gusta tirar el cruising todo el día, buscando a las mujeres como si el mundo acabaría. Pero no sabías que tú podías continuar tu educación para superarte en la vida. Hermano joven, levanta tu frente y siente el orgullo de ser un descendiente de los aztecas, los incas y los mayas. Ayúdame a pelear y vencer.
Antonio Díaz con su programa de Mestizo Experience. Estamos el mes de marzo. A ver, me quito esto para que me escuchen mejor. Otra vez. This is a Mestizo Experience program. Antonio Díaz, still wearing a mask. We're still in these COVID times. Le estaba hablando en español. Les digo, este programa es bilingüe. It is bilingual program for those that are just tuning in for the first time, even though I've been on the air going on 27 years now. Yeah. And this is a COVID generation. I was talking to some parents, and their children are about 3 years old now, and they said, you know that my son is asking why is it that we're always wearing a mask, and he sees people that don't wear it, and he asks why don't they wear it, and why do we wear it? And so I just said, well, I guess we've had, what was it, the greatest generation, and then now the millennials. So now I guess we're going to have the COVID generation, right? And growing up with masks. So I just said that. This is a COVID generation. Mask wearers, they won't know anything but masks. And hopefully eventually it'll subside as we see the government and businesses trying to work together to eliminate the mask wearing while still trying to deal with all the people in the emergency rooms coming down with different coronaviruses. Because of course they're saying the viruses are adapting to the different antibacterial and antiviral medications that are being put out there by Johnson & Johnson and everybody else, Moderna and whatever. So they keep changing. Le estaba hablando, estaba hablando con una gente, unos papás, mamás, y trabajan sus niños de 3, 4 años, y que los niños estaban preguntando por qué siempre usan máscara y hay gente que no usa máscara. Y pues yo les dije, pues han habido varias generaciones, ¿no? Diferentes generaciones, como los milenios, ahora estos que están empezando hoy van a ser la generación del COVID, ¿no? Y hablamos un poco sobre eso. Es que los gobiernos de hoy en día y también pues el comercio, ¿no? Los negocios quieren ya parar de usar la máscara, parar de decirle a la gente que no tenga miedo ya del COVID, pero es difícil cuando todos los días todavía hay miles de gente o cientos de gentes en los hospitales sobre estos virus, ¿verdad? Y los virus que siguen cambiando, les siguen poniendo diferentes nombres, porque estos virus se están adaptando y cambiando a las diferentes medicinas, inyecciones, vacunas que están dando. De lo que estaba hablando ahorita en inglés, que le digo, el programa es bilingüe, ya tenemos 27 años en el aire. No sé qué tantas veces sintonicen este programa o si es la primera vez, pero es bilingüe. Y a veces también hasta unas palabras náhuatl, por eso es el programa, el nombre de Mestizo, la experiencia mestiza o Mestizo Experience, que siempre ha tratado de ligarnos que tenemos sangre indígena. Y como dije años para atrás, cuando empecé el programa, antes que lo empezara, tenía una organización que nos llamábamos Mestizos en Marcha. Y eso era para tratar de ligar a los que siempre tratan de nomás a reclamar o proclamarse hispanos, que actualmente son gentes indígenas colonizados por los hispanos. ¿verdad? Es lo que es. Porque la Iglesia Católica no es original de aquí, aunque han habido guerras, que he hablado yo sobre estas guerras que han habido por todo Sudamérica y en México en contra de la Iglesia Católica y en favor, ¿no? Que hasta en Nuevo México echaron fuera a la Iglesia Católica a todos los que andaban ahí, los sacerdotes, y luego los pidieron para atrás. Eso sí es estar colonizado, ¿no? Anyway, I keep reiterating that our program is bilingual, and the reason it's bilingual is because I've always pushed onto Spanish-speaking people that they're not from Spain, that we are an indigenous population that was colonized by the Spaniards, and so that's why it's mestizo experience, right? Because that's one of the rungs of the ladder, or as that racial divide that the Spaniards created, that either you were pure Spanish born in Spain or pure Spanish born in New Spain, which was, of course, our continent here, or you were a mestizo, which meant you were mixed Spanish and indigenous, or to them the lowest rung was being pure native, which, of course, to us here that are fighting for our identity, being able to proclaim that you have all indigenous blood, going whichever way, whatever tribe, as long as it's indigenous, is what we try to emphasize on as having full rights of this land, whether you want to migrate or natural resources or get repatriated items, whatever they may be, burial items, items of art, items that other countries have taken. We should have that strong voice to say, we are the original people, and all what you've done is just stolen and taken and colonized. And see, that was a whole emphasis on my program, which has been for 27, going on 27, it's 26 years. In November it'll be 27, or no, October, I believe. Yes. The whole 26 years that I've been, or going on 27 now in October, it's been to emphasize that we are not Spanish people, and that Mexico, the word Mexico didn't come from Spain. So whenever someone says, "Oh, well, you're a dirty Mexican, go back to your country," we're already in our country, in our land, right? Because we used to migrate freely, whether you were from Mexicoyot or wherever. Aslan, which a lot of people don't like to talk about Aslan, say it's a myth, but to most of us, we know that it's one of our origins, or stories of origins of our people. And so if we came from the Great Lakes area or the Four Corners area, mainly I believe in the Great Lakes, because a lot of it has to do with cranes, right? White cranes, Aslan. And so the migration and how long it took to get to Tenochtitlan and the other nations, all nations have, from indigenous nations, have their story of origin, right? And whether they migrated from the sea onto land, or if they traversed all land. But all this is what I talk about, and the impact of the colonization, and not just the impact of the initial colonization, but the consolidation. The consolidation is still going on right now. See, here in the United States, you have all this anti-immigration legislation declaring indigenous people illegals because of nationality. So if someone is born in Mexico, they cannot cross the U.S.-Mexican border that was set up in 1848, 1850, because the United States, it took the northern states of Mexico, even though Mexico, again, everybody likes to say, well, Mexico itself was created by Spain and took all this land. No, but we used to migrate already. See, that's why Aslan, whether it was in the Great Lakes area, which is now Michigan and Illinois and Wisconsin, all that area, at one time, we used to migrate freely, right? And trade freely. which again, that's why I talk about commerce and how a lot of these state and, of course, national governments, U.S., Mexico, and Central and South America, Canada, they're dealing with COVID. So they're trying to say that it's subsiding or it doesn't exist or whatever. Stop wearing the mask. Everybody go back to work. Let your children go back to school. Even though these different coronaviruses that are adapting are impacting children just as well now. Now, not as heavily as adults, because children, of course, their immune systems are stronger as they're developing them, right? They develop them as babies, and they keep on developing, which is when an adult gets sick from a child, an adult gets way sicker because the child is more virulent, right? Anyway, a lot of these things. So telling parents, your child isn't going to get sick, just send him to school without a mask, and your teachers can be in there live without a mask, is endangering everybody, right? I think I said this before City Council a few months ago, maybe even last year. Hard to remember. But I said that we indigenous people have been dealing with viruses, European viruses, and viruses from across the sea for over 500 years. That's what decimated our population. Everybody thinks it was, oh, well, you guys couldn't fight. And yeah, even though we didn't have steel, iron, gunpowder, most of the times our warriors, our different nations were able to defend themselves against Europeans, be they Spanish, French, English, whoever was attacking that area of our continent. But it was the diseases, see, that I guess if you talk about the Spanish flu, that they want to call it, even though it wasn't originally from Spain, I think it was taken because it was during World War I, right? 1918, 1917. Anyway, around that time, there was the one that killed a lot of Europeans. This is when they pay attention. But a lot of historians say that that's what ended World War I, without anyone really mentioning it. And nowadays we have, of course, these different coronaviruses in the 21st century. Well, it somehow escapes everybody's mind that what they did to indigenous people back in the 15th and 16th century by wiping out millions and millions. Because, of course, those living on our continent now want to say that we weren't as heavily populated, and there was scarcely anybody, so they just moved into barren lands. But somehow those barren lands were cultivated, right? Somehow they keep finding old stone buildings, stone roads that those farmers in the 18th, 19th century promptly tried to destroy, right? So this is the message that I've been trying to spread for 26 years, is that we were here as a people. We've survived many, many different things, including a viral attack, actually a war, a bacteriological war, because once the Spaniards knew that we couldn't survive smallpox and all that, well, they started really pouring it on. And so did the whatever, I don't know what you want to call it, when the U.S. started developing itself and started really encroaching onto the center of this continent, taking on different nations. They were spreading through either meat or blankets or anything they could, viruses onto indigenous people. Once they found out that they could survive it, but we couldn't, because we didn't have the contact with them. So we've survived many, many things. But the one thing that I keep seeing, again, what I keep saying is consolidation, is the change in our way of seeing ourselves, that we think I see brown-skinned people turn against brown-skinned people over nationality. One, I don't know if they're Mexica, Otomi, or whatever other nation they may be, Huichol or whatever, because they're born on this side, telling the other one that they'd go back home, you're a foreigner, you're something. So to me, it's really when you're super colonized, and when you're entrenched into your nationalistic identity that's been imposed on you maybe 100 and some odd years less, because I think I hear this even from people that are first generation Mexicans here, that go around saying, well, my parents came over here illegally, but now I'm all for this legal stuff, and we naturalized and did this and that, and so we want everybody to follow the rules. Whether the rules keep changing and becoming more and more worse, because illegal migration, as they want to call it, once used to be a civil violation, not a criminal, not a felony, not something that would put you in prison, not something that would tear up your family life so badly as it does now. That's why I say it just keeps on the consolidation of taking away our land, taking away any right of our people to be able to feel as indigenous people, right? As having pride in saying, this is my mother country. No. Instead, you got to have a pride about saying that you're Roman Catholic, so maybe you're Italian blood, or saying you're Spanish, so maybe you come from Spain, instead of saying that you're from here. You can't claim, and I've even heard some Anglos say, well, there was nobody here. No one is indigenous to this continent. That's BS. If we've been here 20,000 years, and they came over here and took it from us 500 years ago, we're the indigenous people, not them. Regardless if you nationalize an identity and say whatever legislations that, because to me it's an occupying government. Whatever laws and anti-immigration legislation they impose on indigenous people because of the borders they've created, that's an occupying government doing that. Les he estado explicando que hablar inglés o hablar español son dos lenguas de los colonizadores, por eso caen cuando hablo náhuatl, pero esa es una cosa como dicen, pues, ¿por qué no lo hablas fluente, no? Pues le digo, porque cuando estaba yo niño me golpeaban por hablando, y mi abuela me decía, oh, tú vas a hablar español porque eres civilizado, ¿no? Yo, ¿cómo? No vas a ser un salvaje indio, no vas... Todo esto ha sido algo que te afecta la mente, te afecta tu identidad, y por eso tengo este programa, para tener orgullo en ser indígena, indigenous pride. Lately, in the news, currently, I'm going to switch subjects. I do this all the time anyway, if you ever watch my program. If you don't, well, you can change the channel or get shocked or say, well, this guy all of a sudden changed subjects. But we're seeing today, along with the virus, right, the main thing on the current news, besides the collapse of our economy, or not the collapse of it, but, you know, the inflation of it, I guess you would say. Everything costs so damn much now. We're talking about gasoline prices, right? Supposedly Russia invading Ukraine is causing all this, but they were already going up before that. I don't know if y'all noticed that. Because where I work for a corporation, right? And so, retail. I won't say the name because I don't want to plug them. There was a customer yesterday talking about how it's the Democrats' fault, and I'm not a Democrat either. But he's talking about Ukraine and Russia and Democrats and Republicans and how the Republicans are so great and everything. And I'm saying, well, you're pretty simplistic. You can't. It's like you don't want to look at the puppet master. The puppet master is in the back. The Republicans are the puppet masters, but they're not the actual puppet masters. The puppet masters are the ones that pay them to pass this such as anti-immigration legislation, right? And such as all these different these corporations, right? Like here in Texas, we have a governor running again, Abbott. He's a Republican. The Attorney General that was under him, all these people, Republicans, judges, and all that, they pass all these laws that favor the wealthy, that favor oil corporations. And so to say, well, the Democrats are the ones that are doing it, even though I think they both get paid off. But the Republicans are the ones that boldly will defend them, regardless if they want to drill in your backyard or whatever it may be. And they were drilling in our backyard. If you're from San Antonio here, this is where I'm from, just past Pleasanton, Texas, which is like 30 miles out, they were over there busting the ground for shale, right? To get shale oil. And so all that they were doing by pouring water and destroying all the environment, poisoning the water basically, and not caring about it. It's a big deal. Just a few years ago, 6 years ago, and supposedly all that oil was to be stored just up here by the Panhandle, close to Oklahoma. And they were fighting over creating a pipeline and leading it into Houston, and because they wanted to sell the oil to China, right, or some other country. And that's just 5 or so years ago. And so all those reserves somehow dried up. No, it's all this manipulation by all these super ultra rich people that own these corporations that are still making all that money. And they're the ones that control global government. When you think about it, if they control the United States, what makes you think they don't control Russia or don't control? So, again, this man yesterday, that's why I said, you're thinking very simplistic, you know. The Republicans are defending their puppet masters, the ones that actually have the hand up their butt into their brain. And that's all they do. When you hear them talk, if you want to feel all nationalistic and you want to say, well, let's defend our borders. And so what is Russia doing over there with Ukraine? Pretty much, I keep saying, they're doing what the United States did to all the indigenous nations, including into Mexico, or which was, I guess, Spain doing it to the indigenous people there until they spread northward up enough. And then the United States did it to them by taking away its northern 8 states when Mexico became a republic and was too weak from fighting off France and Germany and England. And so I study history. And so to me, right now it's just history in the making, right? But it's the same history. I don't know which ones. I think Santana said about the people that don't remember their history being doomed to repeat it. Well, you keep seeing it happening over and over again. But it's because back then the wealthy were the monarchies, right? And some were overthrown, like in Russia. But you still have the super rich, I guess, the oligarchy, if you want to call it. That's that 1% or 2% of the population, if you want to call it, the families that keep control of everything, banking, natural resources that they steal from other nations, like they're doing it right now to Central America, Middle East, and Africa, and here, right? But here in the United States, this occupying government is already sucking it all up. We have some indigenous or native people reservations that used to be prisons but now have turned into communal type living, but are still not truly sovereign as supposedly they're supposed to be. We're supposed to be. We here in Texas, we have no recognition of our indigeneity, right? Of our indigenous identity. We can say it. I think even I have some native blood that, by a linguistic, the Coahuiltecos have some state honorarium or something recognition, but not official, not statewide, not federal. See, so all these, how they create all these different entities within this occupying government that displaces us, that takes all our rights away as indigenous people. And this is what I talk. So anyway, I was talking to that man, and to me, it's just, this is how my mind thinks. So to listen to somebody just, well, it's the Democrats, and so I just told him, well, with what's going on right now, who do you think is going to be in power in 2 years or 4 years from now? I said, who? The Republicans. So why do you think all this is going on right now? It's not going on. The Democrats, if they could, would change it so they could be in power, stay in power. But they can't, because those corporations control the Republicans, and the Republicans are saying, okay, well, how do we get back in power? Hey, let's jack all this up while we have a Democratic president. Blame him. We get a Republican president. We might even get that jackass of Trump back, right? Who was kissing up to the other jackass of Putin, who's over there in the Ukraine. So you see, but because this guy said, well, I don't care about somebody using bad language or having bad manners, being a bad president, as long as our prices are low and we can live good. Okay. So if we can exploit everybody, exploit the humanity of everybody, have low prices, even, I guess, put in danger coming generations by polluting everything, just by the way that the oil was being dug out of here with I guess you can call me a leftist. I don't know what type of thinking you might think, but it would be better if it actually was communal. I don't think, because I got in some little argument, all my things have been hacked, right? Because of how I speak. I don't, like I told this guy, I just go after the BS. I don't care what party, or whether you're a communist or you're a capitalist. If you're saying somebody is so great, and I can tell you, well, that person killed 14 or so million of his own people to stay in power, and he was super rich, so super rich you couldn't even breathe on him. And you say that's communism. Well, I'm not for it. I am for communal type living, where everybody gets the same education, same type of living, same medical treatment, same nutrition, without anyone looking at someone else's table to see what they're eating, if they're eating any better, to see if their kids are better, have better opportunities in the future than others. I think we should all have the same opportunities, and then let your natural talents or whatever you're given rise up. San Antonio Díaz with Mestizo Experience, lamentablemente le ha hablado puro inglés. Tosticate.
¿Qué onda, carnal? Dice mi gente, la raza está abajo y tú estás indiferente. Prefieres cerrar los ojos, no vi nada. Estabas ocupado por andar en la tomada. Te gusta tirar el cruising todo el día, buscando a las mujeres como si el mundo acabaría. Pero no sabías que tú podías continuar tu educación para superarte en la vida. Hermano joven, levanta tu frente y siente el orgullo de ser un descendiente de los aztecas, los incas y los mayas. Ayúdame a pelear y vencer esta...